Welcome everyone, this is YMP TV. I'm Jean from YMP Switzerland. So Bianca Desprez has been doing an amazing job over the last couple of months talking to mining executives and stakeholders and to hear their thoughts about the trend in the mining industry. And she contacted us recently and asked if we could run the interview this time because our guest today is Jörgen Sandström, Head of Metal and Mining at the World Economic Forum, which is based in Switzerland. Jörgen has more than 20 years of experience working in energy and commodities, as well as in diplomacy, and he's been working at the World Economic Forum since 2018. Jörgen, good morning. Thanks for being with us today.
Hello.
Hello. So to kick things off, Jörgen, most of our audience will have heard about the Davos Forum, which takes place every year and which is a big gathering of politics, economists, executives who try to shape the future. But could you tell us exactly what are the roles and activities of the World Economic Forum outside of this specific event, and how does the World Economic Forum support the mining industry?
Thank you very much. Happy to be on the show and happy to have this discussion. So my name is Jörgen Sandström, and I'm the head of mining and metals community at the World Economic Forum. We are the international organization for public-private partnership, and we do, you could say, work in 4 different dimensions. So we generate a lot of insight. We are trying to identify challenges, opportunities for collaboration between public and private stakeholders. We talk about multi-stakeholder cooperation, but usually you have to start by identifying, first of all, what does the problem or what does the opportunity or the challenge look like? And second of all, who needs to be in the room? So what type of leaders do we need in the room to address this? So we speak about ourselves as generating a lot of insight. We speak about ourselves as having a strong convening power or facilitating collaboration. And once you have people in the same room, you can start talking about collective action, or how do we address this problem together? And so I think that's the easiest way to describe the work of the forum. We are well known for our flagship event, such as Davos, the annual meeting in Davos, but we do about 300 large meetings per year. We also curate what we call communities. So we have different types of communities. So we have communities for chairperson, or communities for family business, or we have communities for very young people that we call shapers. But we also have very specific communities on industry. So I am the head of one of the 20 industry communities at the forum. And in these communities, we have an industry agenda. We look at how can we collaborate as an industry, first of all, and then how can we collaborate with key stakeholders. And that's how a lot of the work is organized in the forum, in communities, and then we cluster all our initiatives, collaboration, content, coalitions, and so on. They are clustered in different platforms. And currently we have 17 different platforms. So my team, together with the chemicals team, the oil and gas team, the electricity community team, we work together in a platform called Future of Energy, Materials and Infrastructure.
Okay, understood. And I mean, digging a little bit into the website of the World Economic Forum, I could see that your team is quite involved in everything related to the green revolution. My question is, I mean, from talking to your members and in your different groups, what are the global trends you are seeing in terms of metal needed for the green revolution? What are the expected winning metals?
Yeah, so we see, of course, I think there is not any revolutionary news that we will need a significant amount of more materials, metals, minerals to decarbonize our economy, to decarbonize our societies going forward. All these mineral intense low carbon technology. So we are talking about wind and solar, electric storage, electric vehicles. You know, if we are to deploy a lot more of these technologies, we will need a lot more copper, lithium, nickel, steel, cobalt, graphite, magnesium, cadmium, titanium, zinc, aluminium, and also these rare earth metals, neodymium, and there's a family of rare earth metals. So some of them really needs to be, let's say, exponentially, you know, we need to use so much more of them. Steel and copper are two very obvious examples, and we already see that the let's say the prices of these metals are going up and the needs are going up. And you know, it's not just because of decarbonization. We're also going to most likely double the population on the planet to 2050, which means that cities and infrastructure and whole subsets of our economies needs to grow to accommodate many more people. That will also need, you know, that kind of growth will also need a lot more materials, a lot more metals, a lot more minerals.
Okay, understood. Yeah, I see. Basically, the range of metal is just increasing through what you mentioned, increase in people on Earth, and also the new green revolutions. So, I mean, what are, in your opinion, again, talking with your members, what are the actions taken by mining companies to be able to supply these metals while complying with more and more stringent ESG requirements?
Well, I think, first of all, I think we need to look at the entire ecosystem or the entire landscape within, you know, around our industries. Not least, I would point at three stakeholder areas, or, you know, where we also see a lot of change. So one is the regulatory space. We see a lot of change when it comes to policy and legislation, where there are more and more demands or asks from resource companies, from mining and metals companies and other resource companies, to be more responsible, to disclose much more data points on their production and on their products. So that's one area that we need to, let's say, take into consideration. Lots of change. Another area is, of course, downstream from our industry, where we see a lot of key end users are asking for more data. They want to know what's inside the commodity products, the materials that they are buying, that they are converting, advanced manufacturing organizations, OEMs, others. And I would also like to add the consumer-facing companies in this downstream category that are increasingly wanting to, you know, showcase to consumers what's inside products. This is driving, let's say, demands and change as well. And thirdly, we have the financial and investor community or sectors where, you know, banks, pension funds, investors, obviously shareholders, insurance company and reinsurance company and others are also more and more, I would even use the word nervous about investment, about how the industry is, let's say, operating and what are the risks, especially long term. If you are concerned about climate financial risk, which you should be if you're a pension fund or an insurance company, there's a lot of stress at the moment. How can we make this industry, you know, both greener in the way they operate and the products more green at the moment? So this is, I would say, is the let's say, the landscape around us. Then you have the response. So a lot of companies are obviously looking at how they can, you know, let's say, on how they operate, how they can reduce water, how they can reduce energy, how they can switch from hydrocarbon-based energy, being it heavy fuel oil, coal, or whatever it is that their energy sources, to renewable energy. We also see a lot of companies who are more and more articulate when it comes to reducing their scope 1, scope 2, but also scope 3 emissions, which is more complex because you really have to involve many more actors in your supply chain to address scope 3 emissions. So there, I would say there's a long list of activities and action taken by mining companies, both big ones and small ones. Then, of course, it depends, again, coming back to what I said earlier, it depends on which jurisdiction you're operating. You know, we see differences between, let's say, if you're a mining company operating in the European context, Canadian context, let's say, if you're operating in South America or in Russia or in China or in India and so on, there are differences between jurisdictions as well. But overall, given what I said earlier, these 3 areas that is, let's say, putting pressure on the industry or asking more of the industry are what are shaping the industry globally. At the World Economic Forum, we have, I think, a good example of activities that the industry are doing collectively. So we are working together with the financial industry on ESG metrics. How can we make them more consistent and comparable? So that's one project. It's cross-industry, but mining and metals and also oil and gas have been very active in this project. We have a blockchain project on responsible sourcing, where we are looking at how you can use this type of ledger technology to trace things or report better or more efficiently, both in-house and externally. We have currently we have 3 decarbonization initiatives. One is on steel supply chain and value chain, another one on aluminium, and a third one on concrete and cement. And these decarbonization initiatives really include the entire supply chain, and they are very much building on, let's say, strong industry leadership, that we have committed leaders, which is, I would argue, a very strong starting point. We also have a quite well-known initiative called the Global Battery Alliance, which is about addressing strong concerns that we have around the sustainability of the battery minerals, both from the extraction point all the way down to the, let's call it the recycling point, or what today is more normal is that it becomes waste. And how can we improve the entire supply chain of the battery minerals? So this is a sort of a palette of initiatives that we are currently running in the industry, in my industry community.
Very interesting. And I think, I mean, you mentioned it in your answer, and there's one area which I found very interesting, and I think which is very dynamic, is the blockchain initiative that is supported by the World Economic Forum. And recently, I think a couple of weeks or months ago, you released the proof of concept of the technology. I mean, it can be kind of technical, but could you maybe briefly explain how it works and what's the purpose behind the development of such technology? What are members or companies involved trying to achieve with this blockchain technology?
I think you have a lot of not different, but you have a number of challenges that may or may not be well addressed by technology in the industry. You also have a number of challenges where you definitely need to collaborate. It's very hard for individual organizations to, let's say, shift the needle, as we say it, to really make a big difference. It might even be hard for, even if the entire industry comes together. As I mentioned earlier, financing of decarbonization, you probably need to have a very large amount of industry players talking to a very large amount or a large group of financing banks and financial institutions. to really overcome some of these challenges. You need collective action. This is no different. We had, going back almost 2.5 years ago, we had a number of our partner companies asking us, the World Economic Forum, what do you think about blockchain? How can we increase, let's say, the usability of this technology? What's the true value of this technology? We have tested the technology on our own, but we realize you need to collaborate. But we don't want to go into, let's say, complicated commercial collaboration. Is it possible to experiment around collaboration? So we proposed, in my case, to the mining and metals companies, let's see if we can experiment around collaboration first, and then experiment around collaboration over technology. So with that in mind, we started off, and eventually 8 organizations wanted to collaborate more, let's say, more closely. And I think the backdrop, you can't just say that technology is valuable. You need to first, let's say, identify what is the problem or what is the challenge, and could technology help you? So we looked at, for example, what I mentioned earlier, the amount of reporting that is needed today and the amount of reporting that is needed going forward. Could technology help? Today, a lot of reporting is done in a somewhat analog way. It's still spreadsheets, it's still, collecting data points, managing data points, disclosing or distributing data points. It's still quite analog in nature. So could ledger technology help? First of all, inside organizations, and then with external, let's say, stakeholders, or the kind of exchanges you need to have with, for example, governmental agencies such as Environmental Protection Agency or customs, or your banks, or with civil society, or with downstream clients or customers, or even midstream clients and customers. Could this new type of ledger technology be helpful? So we convened, as I said earlier, we are strong in our convening. We brought together a group of companies, and we looked at what could be a sort of a first experimental use case. So we agreed that tracing emissions is something we all need to address. Doesn't matter who you are, size of company, where you are in the supply chain, you most likely already need to address emissions in one way, and for sure going forward you will have to address emissions. So we choose tracing emissions in the supply chain as our first use case. So we have built a very simple blockchain platform, simple sort of, you can call it database, where we have made a simplistic model of the entire supply chain for copper. And just to showcase that, yes, it's possible to collaborate, and the technology, let's say, allows for collaboration, and I mean, in a way you could say that all of us knew that the technology works. What is hard is to collaborate, really collaborate between large commercial competitive organization. So I've said collaboration several times, but it's really the emphasis of this project. And in a more technical term, it's the governance of a consortium like this that is really, really important. You have to be really, really diligent in how you set things up, how you manage it, how you take decisions, and how you, if you decide to open up the consortium, how fast do you increase the membership, and so on. There's a lot of things to think about with regards to governance. And going forward, our intent, or our hope, you could say, we are just taking decisions on what to do next, is to make a much more complex or advanced or ambitious collaboration. So that's, let's say, the first part. For that, you need to have a much more detailed scope and concept. So that, I think, you could summarize that as one area that we would like to take forward. The other area is standards. You need to make sure that all participating organizations are aligned, so that a kilo is a kilo, an apple is an apple for everyone, and so on. This is usually, and we are surrounded by different consortium that we have looked at, and almost all of them says that it's really important that you get this piece right, that you have coherence, agreement, alignment on all standards when it comes to what data that you input, how you input, and the format. You know, you can say the language, the vocabulary, and so on needs to be aligned, and it's very often not when it comes to these type of industry collaborations. And then the third area is, of course, to make the actual software much more advanced. So some of the ideas we have is that this could cover not only emissions, but also other areas on ESG areas, or if you look at reporting requirements that regulators are asking for, or assurance framework, sustainability standards, that if you want to certify yourself under Aluminium Stewardship Initiative, or Copper Mark, or IRMA, or ICMM performance expectations, or responsible steel. These type of assurance frameworks are also asking for a lot of data points. So I see a lot of opportunities that this could potentially be, as I said earlier, valuable both for internal reporting, internal collection and management of data, and your external management and reporting on different sustainability data points.
Very, very interesting. I think something definitely to continue monitoring, because a lot of potential on that area, I believe. Moving on to another topic, but it kind of reflects as well the rapidly advancing technology world in which we live. You know, there are plenty of new technologies being developed, you know, and this will impact the workplace of mining. How are mining companies preparing for this?
Well, I would try to summarize it that, you know, this green revolution, or, you know, sort of the decarbonization or increased sustainability of both operations and of the commodities or the products being produced, you know, very closely linked to this is you know, I would say an rapidly advancing of digitalization, robotization, automation, and so on. This is nothing new. You know, part of the industry is very digital, very automated, very advanced in the way it operates. But we could really see, for example, over the last year, how COVID, you know, it in a way took all these plans that many of these companies had for digitizing, or, you know, becoming a more, let's say, technology savvy organization. It just swept a lot of this aside, and it became imperative to do all this now. So what we are seeing is really how a lot of organizations are, let's say, putting maximum pressure on their let's say, consultants and internal teams to do this digitization now. And it's for, you know, a number of reasons, but I think, you know, a lot of the reasoning is around resilience, around really making sure that you are able to both ramp up and ramp down operations, and so on. And so this is really happening right in front of us. This in turn will have an impact on the workforce going forward. So we have a quite large initiative project together with ICMM and other partners, but that we call Future of Work, where we are looking at, how do you build or create efficient models for reskilling and upskilling and attracting talent, and also how do you develop leadership going forward, because the organizations are really changing, but the organizations are also in a way suffering because average age is very high, and in many jurisdictions you also have tension between employer and employees, between unions and companies and so on. So there's a lot of things to really let's say think through and look at in a very holistic manner, or as I prefer to say, you can have this sort of management perspective and sort of leadership perspective from an industrial point of view, but you also need to have the community perspective. So we do a lot of work in this regard. A lot of our partners are doing the same, as individual companies. They are really trying to address how do you respond to especially now over the last year, and also there's a lot of learnings over the last year in how you can prepare yourself for the future.
Okay. I mean, we're slowly getting to the end of our interview. There is one question that we like to ask our guests, because we are a young mining professional organization. So what advice would you give to people like young professionals wanting to join the mining industry and want to participate in transforming it?
It's a good question. I think, sort of trying to build on what I just say, I think, from an internal point of view, first of all, I think it's imperative that you really think through how you cultivate your workforce overall. You need to prepare yourself for a very rapidly changing future. The changes taking place, and we can see all the public commitments just over the last year by all the main economies of the world and by the main corporations of the world. I usually highlight, let's say, what European Union, United States as of this month, and China as of last September, what they now want to do over the next 20 to 30 years. This means a lot of change. Then you have the largest, most powerful companies in the world. They are called Apple and Google and so on. They are very adamant how they want to operate 10 years from now. So we as an industry really need to prepare all aspects of how we operate and our workforce for a very let's say different future. I think that's the first part. And this is not like you can't sit and wait. You have to really address this today, because you have to think, coming in to your questions around young mining professionals. One thing that is quite brutal is demography. If you don't plan for the workforce you want to have, let's say 20 years from now, you won't have that workforce. So you really have to think through what kind of workforce do you want to have 5 years, 10 years, 15 years from now. And a lot of organizations, they don't have a lot of horizon in their planning, maybe 3 years, maybe 5 years, but not much more. But I really think you have to, sort of think through. And then coming into your question, I think to attract talent, as I said earlier, the industry is digitizing, the industry is automating, robotization and so on. It means that mining and metals companies will go from competing between each other to compete with the rest of the world. So you will not just compete mining to mining and so on. You will compete with every single company in the world. So that means you have to think again a lot. How do you attract young, well-educated or smart people that you really want that should really come to you as a mining company? And as I said earlier, I mentioned demography. You know, the average age is very high throughout. You know, in some cases, the average workforce is 5 to 6 years older in mining and metals than the rest of the workforce in many of the key mining and metals jurisdictions. So I think that, you know, the pandemic in a way has offered an opportunity for change, you know, that you're sort of forced to do certain things. So I think that's maybe, it's a lot of pessimism to a certain degree, and this is not an easy year behind us and a continued difficult situation. But I do think that there are opportunities in coming out of this, let's call it COVID crisis. I think the industry needs to work as a collective again. You know, it's really about the positioning of the industry. It's not well understood in sort of the broader public. I think, you know, positioning of industry needs to be very high up on the agenda. I think you need to look at regional specificities. You know, you have to understand why is the industry you know, maybe not an attractive place to work, because your geography differs so much. So you have to understand, you know, the different regions. I think the industry should be much better in you know, I've mentioned several times already, you know, we have to look at things from a supply chain. You have to really engage with downstream, especially consumer facing brands. I keep saying that, you know, again, I like to use Apple as an example because it's such a well-known company. But, you know, if you go into an app store, if you go into a, you know, car dealership, the salespeople really need to speak about the materials overall. But what stops an Apple salesperson to say that, you know, this mobile phone has a really fantastic screen and a camera, blah, 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 all these kind of features, and then switch it over and say, and by the way, the aluminium protecting your phone is green aluminium from Quebec. You know, there's nothing hindering, or green aluminium from anywhere, you know, but it's like nothing hindering Apple from actually speaking about the materials in a much more open way. Same when you go into a car dealership. You know, it's very rare that you hear a car salesman speak about any of them. He may or may not say something about the leather seats, but, you know, maybe the cool alloys, wheels or something like that. But, you know, he doesn't speak about the steel, the copper, the cobalt, or any other, you know, of the minerals or the metals. So I think that needs to change, and the industry needs to have this conversation, you know, with downstream key end users in construction, technology, automotive, and so on.
Yeah, I think that's a good point. I think this is something we're seeing is changing, and I would say maybe it started with the diamond industry, right? Which had a strong need to be able to trace the diamond, so that, you know, when you offer a diamond to your fiance, you know where it comes from, and you can be sure of the sustainability, let's say, or the good credentials of the diamond you're offering. So yeah, that's very interesting. And maybe from the perspective of the students or young mining professionals, so in terms of, I understand, like, it's a very rapidly moving environment. So I suppose for young people, in terms of advice, would be to remain adaptable and to kind of keep on learning new skills to be workable, to remain workable.
I think it's the easiest is to see what are other industries doing. You know, like look at automotive industry, it's not easy to look where they were 20 years ago, but if you look at how a worker operates today in the automotive industry, they are looking after a robot doing the job. And they love the robot, if I can be a bit simplistic, because it's due, especially in the European context, it's due to the robot that there are still automotive companies in Europe. Otherwise, everything else would have been probably in China. So you have an, you know, but the let's say the worker is very versatile, or very sort of, he has a number of different skills, or he performs many different types of jobs, not just one monotone job. And it's the same in industry after industry that is digitizing, automating, robotization. You know, to put it simply, you have a very long list of jobs on their way out. That's basically what is happening, and that list is just growing. But you also have a very long list that also is growing of jobs on their way in, and that's the list to watch. So, you know, we issue reports. You know, I mentioned flagship reports that we do is, you know, Future of Jobs report, Future of Skills report, and there you can see an overview of what is going on. But it's easy to look at other industries who's already been disrupted. You know, the old way of doing things is gone. You know, and you have new types of skills. So it's not a mystery. You know, it's all there. It's just that it hasn't fully happened in mining and metals industries, but it's happening now. Okay.
All right. Well, Jörgen, thanks a lot. I think we will add to end the interview here. Thank you very much for being with us today. It was a pleasure talking to you, and lots of interesting topics that we had the chance to discuss. Thanks a lot for sharing your thoughts on YMP TV platform, and yeah, I look forward to keep on engaging with you, and yeah, let's keep in touch. Thank you very much.
Thank you, my pleasure, and look forward to see you again.
Yeah, thank you, Jörgen.